Is this one of the best professional monitor options for your Mac? Let's talk about it. Welcome back to the channel. So if you watch my channel, you know last year, maybe in the middle of last year, I did a review of a great monitor. It was the BenQ PD3225U BenQ monitor, and it looks very similar to the one sitting right here, all right? You can check out that video. I'll put up a link. You can see it right here, but go ahead and check that video out. That was one of the best performing monitors of the year. It was an awesome monitor for professionals for sure. Now it had a couple of shortcomings though, and they were kind of brightness. I think it was like up to 250 to 300 nits and some contrast ratio stuff. But overall, it was one of the best monitors of the year for sure. The problem is if you're actually someone looking for a monitor and you want to spend, $1,000 or $1,100 on a monitor, you need to get something back that justifies that cost. So what we're going to do today is BenQ has a new model sitting right here, and we're going to go over this thing to see if this is better than the last one, if it fixes some of the issues, and if it's still one of the best monitors out there you can buy right now for around $1,000, $1,100. Let's get into it. All right, full disclosure first of all. BenQ saw that I did a video on the older model, and they liked the video. I got like 60,000 views on that. So they said, hey, we want to send you the newer model to see if you guys like this year. So I said, okay, for sure, send it out to me. Full disclosure though, they're not paying me for this video, number one. Number two, they didn't ask to see the video before I actually put it out there. So they're not reviewing the video in any way. They just sent me the monitor. This is actually going to be BenQ's new PD3225U 32-inch 4K. They call it the designer monitor for designers, and this is actually a great professional monitor. But again, we're going to get into all the features and functions, and if it's worth that hard-earned money of yours for $1,000, let's get into it. Okay, so who actually buys a monitor like this? That's the question. Well, first of all, if you're someone that needs something that's super color accurate on the screen, maybe you're a wedding photographer or photographer for a company, maybe you do video editing for a company, or even do high-end YouTube videos. This thing's perfect because of the color accuracy on the screen. That's actually what you're paying for. You're making sure that anything on that screen is extremely color accurate to what's going to come out on the final version of it. And that's really why you're paying up for monitors like this. Now, if you only need like a $500 or $400 monitor and you just do gaming and you're not a professional as far as work is concerned, then you really don't need a $1,000, $1,100 monitor. The panel doesn't have to be perfect. Now, these things are, you're really paying for a panel that's going to be a class above some of those other ones that are down in the $500 range. And there's a difference there, obviously, in the panel type and what they're actually shipping out to you, calibration, testing, things like that. So overall, you got to expect a better monitor here for the money. Okay, so now I have to get into some specs, and I hate specs, but I have to do it for people that want to know what this is all about. After the specs, though, stay tuned for the video because I want to give you my honest, real-world, personal review of this. Is this good for a professional, number one? Is it good for somebody like me that does YouTube, number two? Is it worth that $1,000, $1,100 to you? And I'm going to give you my full, honest review. I've been using this for a while, and just do I love it? Is it just kind of mediocre? So stay tuned for that because I'm going to get into the weeds there a little bit more. But first, we got to do the specs. All right, so it says 32-inch, but it's actually a 31.5-inch IPS panel here. And let me just see, it's 4K, obviously, 16:9 aspect ratio, as you can see, obviously, 3840 by 2160. Now, it's got 400 nits, which is actually a huge upgrade. The last model of this, the PD3225U, that only had, I think, 300 or even less when it was tested. This is substantially brighter screen here, which is awesome. Huge noticeable difference for me, and overall, they fixed that problem perfectly. Because of that, this is actually now HDR10 and then display HDR 400 compatible because of the 400 nits of brightness. So that's obviously an added kind of feature that they've added to this because of that. Also, the contrast ratio they fixed. So the old one was 1,000 to 1. It had very good blacks, but not the deepest. This one is perfect. It's 2,000 to 1 contrast ratio. As you can see, the blacks are super, super deep, and it matches my MacBook screen perfectly, which we'll get into, but it's phenomenal with the blacks as well. Now the response time is 5 milliseconds, but this is not a gaming monitor. It's only 60 hertz, and I know the police are going to come out and say, oh, I only get 120. That's fine. If that's not for you, it's not for you. This is more for design work professionals that don't need 120, 180 hertz. So 60 hertz is what you get here, and that's, you just have to deal with that factor. That's maybe the only negative there, but again, for designers, it's maybe not a huge issue. This thing's also 98% P3, 99% Rec 709, 99% sRGB. So it's awesome with the color accuracy as well, and we talked about that. Now it has a ton of modes as well, and we'll just touch on them. It's got an animation mode, black and white mode, CAD mode, darkroom mode, DCI P3 mode, display P3 mode, HDR mode, low blue light mode. But the one you want to worry about is actually the MBook mode, which actually makes it mimic your MacBook screen, which is awesome. So it's the MBook mode. You want to just make sure you're in that. And then also it's got the Rec 709 mode and everything else, including user modes, which you can set up yourself. I'm not going to get into all those weeds because that's not what it's all about. Now, there's one little negative that I didn't talk about yet, and it's going to be the speakers. They're 2 times 2.5 watts. Obviously, they're what you expect on a monitor like this. Professionals usually will use a headphone jack over here. It does have one. And they'll use other speakers or studio speakers. So this is there if you need it, but it's not the best. Just full disclosure, it's a little tinny and stuff, not like the studio display. That's one of the trade-offs. Obviously, that's a lot more expensive. But overall, you're not going to get speakers that, obviously are going to be something that you're going to be using every single day here, but at least it comes with them. So it does have a 100 by 100 millimeter VESA mount on the back of it, which is really nice. And one thing I love about this thing is the stand. So the stand can move all different directions. Let me just show you a close-up of that with a video here. But you can see it moves up and down, it moves left and right, it moves forward and back. So obviously, unlike the studio display, this thing can move any direction you want it to. It moves really high, really low. On the back of it, it's also super easy to take off of this thing. So there's a little clip back here. You just slide it on and you click a button and it slides right in, slides right out. You can get it in and off the stand in about 2 seconds. That's a huge feature. Also the look of it, it's very kind of professional. It's all black. It's made out of plastic on the back. The stand is made out of some metal here. But overall, obviously, I like the look of it. It's got very thin bezels, very little branding. On the very front on the stand, way over there, it's got a BenQ little teeny thing. But overall, it's just a black monitor with very thin bezels. Okay, so here's my honest review. And I still have to talk about the ports, though. We'll get into that in a little bit. But overall, here's my honest opinion of this. If you're a professional, it's a no-brainer. It's a great monitor if you need a large screen, color-accurate screen. $1,000, $1,100, totally worth it. But if you're like me, somewhere in between, you're going to be spending $600, $700, $800 on a 32-inch quality screen to begin with. So here we are around $1,000, $1,100. Is it worth it? Let me tell you, first of all, the size of the screen. So, I can get a lot done with this. I can put 3, 4 things up on here at once, and it's just a huge amount of real estate versus having to sometimes buy 2 different monitors. If you bought a studio display, you may have to buy 2 27 inches, which is like $3,400. You could probably get away with just using one of these. Also, the text clarity. Now, this is something that always comes up every time, is the sharpness on a 4K monitor. Is there scaling issues? Let's take a step back. So we all know, and I'm not going to get into the weeds here, we've talked about it a million times, Macs like 5K, Macs like 5K monitors, and they scale to maybe 1440p, but the 4K sometimes has more fuzzy text. I can tell you just from my experience, everyone else might be different. This is only one person, but this is the best monitor I've ever tested at a 4K monitor for the scaling issue, where the text is pretty sharp. Now, is it going to be as sharp as a 5K studio? Maybe not, but to my eyes and sitting the distance I can't tell the difference. It's very, very sharp for what it is, especially being a large screen. So it's the best one I've ever tested on a 4K monitor with sharpness of text. Obviously, the video quality, the deep blacks, everything else is just phenomenal on the screen, so I can't complain on anything there. I love it, and it's going to be something I'm going to be using for a long time. All right, the ports on the back of it, and I'll put up a diagram here, but it's got a ton of them. It's got, obviously it's got Thunderbolt 3 ports on the back, which we'll talk about in a second, a bunch of HDMI 2.0s, DPI.4, so a display port as well, USB 3.2, USB-C, USB 3.2, headphone jack. It's got a whole bunch. You can see them right there. Now, this thing is just basically plug and play. It's phenomenal. It works with the Thunderbolt. They gave me a Thunderbolt 4 cable, but it's Thunderbolt 3 connections in the back. This thing also works as a hub where you can have multiple computers and just one keyboard and mouse, and it can flip between the different computers. So it's kind of a built-in hub there. Charges your MacBook at 85 watts. You can, put in hard drives, connect a hard drive to this thing as well, and it's going to work on your Mac. So overall, that's, I think, way better than the studio display there. You get a lot more ports, a lot more functionality, multiple computers. It's perfect on that. You don't need anything else. It also comes with this little hockey puck here, and I'll show you some close-ups of that. The reason you like this is if you use a VESA mount or something and it's against the wall and you need to change the settings, on the back there's these really kind of nondescript buttons, and you can see them back here, but they basically help you change some of the settings. But this hockey puck, when you connect it, and it has its own port, doesn't take up one of the ports, you can actually go ahead and just move this little dial, and it'll dial in the brightness and all that stuff for you. So it's just an added feature. You can customize it as well to do multiple functions depending on what button you push. It's just an added bonus, but it's there, and I don't use it that much, but I know a lot of people love these things. So overall, it's a positive as well. Now, when you buy a monitor this expensive and you're thinking, well, what am I getting for it, right? Obviously, we talked about all the other stuff. You're really getting a uniform panel. So what they do is they actually give you a full calibration sheet, And every monitor has got its own calibration sheet that they provide to you, and it goes through a full calibration of your monitor to make sure it matches all the colors of the MacBook and all that stuff combined. But also, it's got a uniformity. I don't know what they call it. I'll put up on the screen, but it's basically some kind of process that they do to make sure all the blacks and all of the brightness, it's got a whole bunch of different zones built into it, so it makes sure that the monitor is uniform across the whole thing. On cheap panels, as you know, like a $400 monitor, from the offsetting looking at it, you might see blotches of white or black or something. These things are known not to have that. They basically have really uniform panels all the way to the corners, which make it, that's one of the things you're paying up on, because you want that uniformity on the panel and you want it to be brilliant all the way across. I mean, we talked about this before, but the brightness also is highly improved on this, up to 400 nits. It's got the HDR 400 built in. So I think it's bright enough for any type of workspace that's indoors. I even had it next to some windows and stuff. Overall, though, everyone's subjective on that as well. But in the studio like I have here, obviously, it's super bright. You're not going to be taking this outside. It's a very heavy monitor. So I think it's going to be, now the last model was maybe a little bit iffy, but this one for sure, brightness is fine. And we're going to address this one last time because people will always ask me this. Why would I get this over the studio display made by Apple? Well, first of all, it's $500 less. Let's just put that off the table, right? That's one thing, but that's maybe not the reason. Number two reason would be the size of it, obviously. You would need one of these maybe versus two studio displays. This is substantially larger. Number three is the connectivity on it. The ports are awesome, way better than the studio display. You have a KVM built into it. It works as a hub. You got side connections over here. You can connect hard drives into it. Just overall, it's a very good performer there. Number four is going to be the stand, obviously. The stand is full ergonomics as far as moving it up, down, sideways, back, forth. Way better than a studio display stand. It's also got a VESA mount. If you want to maybe later on, you can go ahead and mount this on the wall or something, or you want a different arm for it without spending more money with the Apple Studio display. So those are all reasons you might consider this. But I mean, obviously, a lot of the things with design and stuff are subjective, so I'm not going to get so much into that. It's something that if you are held up on that 4K versus 5K and the scaling, again, what I told you, this is the sharpest 4K monitor I've tested. You'd have to maybe see it in person. Maybe you can go out and see one and see if you like it, yourself. Maybe make sure you change the resolution and the settings, obviously, to what you want. But definitely take a look at it and see if you really like it, and then you can make your determination that way. I mean, for me though, like things like the hockey puck, I mean, those type of things are a novelty. I don't really care too much about them. I'm not willing to pay up for that kind of stuff, but that's just me. Maybe other people are different. But I mean, for me, a YouTuber that has 25,000 subscribers, would I really put the money out for this monitor? And I would say absolutely, and I'll tell you why. Number one, I want a big screen and I want to be able to put a lot of stuff up on it. I'm not one that likes multiple screens, dragging back and forth. That's just me. Personally, that's me. Also, I want to make sure whatever I do is color accurate. A lot of times I'm not the best at it, but I still like to actually match my Mac screen. Otherwise, I'm dealing with an issue that I have to always see. I have to move it back and forth to see how it looks on the Mac. I don't want to have to deal with that. So that's number two. And, obviously that's going to make it worth a little bit more money to me. And number three, what are the other options if you want a full uniformity, if you want uniformity across the panel, really dark blacks, bright monitor. You want all that stuff in a 32-inch monitor, you're going to be spending like $800 anyway, even on some cheaper ones that aren't even certified as well. I mean, this has got all those certifications I talked about. So overall, I think this is a good option for those people, and that's just my honest opinion. I mean, I'm not, like I said, this monitor was sent to me, obviously, but they didn't test, they didn't tell me what I had to say, they're not even checking what I'm saying. I would tell you if this is bad. It's something that I think is worth the money when you're considering the studio display at that $1,600 price point. It's definitely slotted in here really nicely. All right, so I'm going to wrap this up, and I hope you like my honest review. It's something that's really hard because I'm one person and I'm really doing a product showcase. What do I feel? Obviously this monitor was sent to me. Am I going to say something bad about it? And I would. Like I said, the speakers are not that great. Things like that. I mean, I'm going to tell you what's bad about it, but realistically for the money, and when I think about the studio display and the size of this thing, this is actually a pretty good deal at around $1,000, $1,100, and I feel that honestly. It's something that I would buy myself, and I'd get a lot of work done on it. It's definitely something that I love big screens. I don't like dual screens and stuff like that, but you may be completely different. So as a product showcaser, not really a reviewer, you have to go out and see this yourself. Maybe look at the text, see if it's clear enough for you. It's clear enough for me, but my eyes might be different than you. I might be sitting further away. So I don't know. But at the end of the day, I do recommend this if you're as a starter, just to give it a test out, and if you don't like it, you can always return it. But overall, I think BenQ's done a really good job here. Anyways, I hope you guys can subscribe to the channel. I do really kind of honest reviews like this all the time, or I call them product showcases. I do a lot of cheaper products, now I'm doing a little bit more expensive products, but I do all types of weird products out there, and I do maybe 2 to 3 a week at least. So I'll talk to everybody in the next one in a couple days here. Peace.